Hi everyone, we're back for our weekly Intel Brief where we cover one economic security issue, one national security issue, and one democracy issue that's important that's happened this week. First, on economic security, let's talk about the shutdown. We're many days into it. It's now the longest government shutdown in history. Let me give you a quick update. First and foremost, there's a group of us, Democrats and Republicans, who are working to try and bring this to resolution. The speed of those conversations has picked up, which is a good thing, but we need the president, the big decider, to get into the conversation. After the elections on Tuesday, he seems more clicked in, but the president is going to need to give his top cover to the Republicans on the other side of the aisle in order to bring this to conclusion. The two big issues that really stick out on the government shutdown are the issue of health care and the issue of SNAP benefits. On health care, again, the big beautiful bill changed a lot of things so that now any one of the 500,000 people on the ACA or the healthcare.gov plans is getting significant increases for January 1st on their plans. So what we're talking about is some sort of relief for people who are seeing, in some cases, 600% increases in their plans. And I get it. I'm a big girl. I know that the Democrats are in the minority. I'm not going to get everything I want in a deal. I also know that the ACA isn't perfect. Obamacare isn't perfect. And reforms are needed in order to really get us on a sustainable footing. But fighting on behalf of people who are seeing things like 600% increases is something I am insistent on, and those negotiations continue. On SNAP, the president was ordered by the courts to pay SNAP benefits out of the contingency fund that was already set up. This was set up for this very purpose, so that we'd never have people run out of money for food. We're hearing different things about whether the president's going to abide by those orders or how difficult it's going to be to get money on those bridge cards in Michigan back up and running. But we think that there's going to be at least some relief for some people next week on those bridge cards, so stay tuned. Next, I want to talk about a security issue, and that is the continued deployment of both federal law enforcement and uniformed military in American streets. The president has tried to send about 7,000 uniformed military into our streets. Law enforcement are in major cities, as you know, like Chicago and Portland. And the president has been talking about his willingness to invoke something called the Insurrection Act. That would allow uniformed military to act in law enforcement roles, something that's very different in American history. That means raids, arrest, detention, something that, again, to me, very much contravenes the spirit our founding fathers put in place on the role of the military in our cities. I want to talk about some of the risks of having federal law enforcement and uniformed military on the ground in our streets, particularly given most of them are not trained or trained well on basic police techniques. I'm very worried that we're going to have a violent incident, that law enforcement, uniformed military are going to overreact when communities start pushing, to see what's going on with one of their loved ones, and you could have violent incidents. We've already seen law enforcement drawing their weapons, hitting cars on the highway, just behavior that gives me pause and makes me concerned that we're going to see violence on the streets of our cities. In response to this very unusual move of putting law enforcement and uniformed military in the streets of our cities against the will of those states, I have put out a bill called the No Troops in Our Streets Act. And it basically says that, look, if the president is putting uniformed military out in the streets of our cities against the will of that state, Congress can vote to terminate that deployment. The bill also allows the president to surge resources to communities that are having issues with crime or violence in the form of extra support for local police departments, right? You can imagine that some of the local police departments in places like Chicago or Portland would be much happier to be able to hire new police officers, train them, support programs that help with violence reduction. If there's truly a problem on these streets, let's put law enforcement, local law enforcement, up to the task instead of putting in uniformed military against the will of those local states. Lastly, I want to talk about the issue of presidential pardons. I've been in support of getting rid of a presidential pardon for either party. I don't think it makes sense in the modern world, and we just saw exactly why it's a problem last week. Last week, President Trump pardoned the CEO of a cryptocurrency company called Binance. The head CEO of it, his name was Zhao. He was already serving a sentence, and last week, President Trump gave him a presidential pardon very early on in his term. The timing of this pardon is what's suspicious. This CEO of this cryptocurrency company had invested heavily in President Trump's family crypto venture. They sealed a deal for the CEO to heavily invest in the company back in May, and then 5 months later, he gets a pardon. So again, it just brings up this real whiff of pay to play, that if you invest in the president's ventures, you're going to get yourself a presidential pardon. That's why I think we should just get rid of the presidential pardon. I didn't like it when Democrats did it. I don't like it when Republicans do it. It's something that we should get rid of. It just does not work in a modern day democracy.